Brand new week. Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking into the TDR Traded Black podcast. Hope you're all doing well. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Earnings season's underway. GTI is dropping at about right now. So, yes, it's full swing. What you'd think. Earnings is probably the biggest announcement this week. No, check that. Ohio adult use goes live 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And this is going to be big news as the industry continues to grow as well. We're going to dive into this news that was actually reported by Marijuana Moment over the weekend involving Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer submitting a letter documentation to the DEA along with Attorney General Merrick Garland to basically outline the urgency to reschedule cannabis. Want to get some takes from that and if this is real this time. So let's welcome in TDR co-host. Happy Monday, Anthony Varell. Happy Monday. Good to see you. How are things?
It was good. It's been a mixed bag. I mean, market is bright red across the board. I mean, the macro is not really helping. World War III rumors aren't really helping.
$2.9 trillion wiped away in the stock market on Friday, and it continued this morning. So, before we get into our announcements, like, what are the things that you're approaching, I guess, this sector, this space, knowing some of the macro stuff that's going on?
I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything whatsoever. I mean, it's pretty much brutal out there. I'll wait for stuff to bottom and then go shopping then. Yeah, interesting times to say the least. But outlined some key things, obviously, in the earnings, or I should say in our newsletter this morning, which was important. If you got a chance, make sure to click on that QR code that we have as usual. Anthony had some really good points in this morning's newsletter, so make sure you are subscribed to the Baked In newsletter. But it is Monday, lots to dive into, including MSOS Mondays. Dan Ahrens is going to join us in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to jump into earnings season. First company out of the gate is Ascend Wellness, who reported their first, or I should say, Q2 2024 earnings before market this morning. Notable highlights included net revenue of $141.54 million compared to $122.9 million from same period 2023. Gross profit amount, $41.57 million compared to $28.32 million same time period last year. They also report, and I think this is important too, a net loss of $21.78 million compared to net income of $841,000 Q2 2023. As it stands now, cash flow operations amounted to $32 million. So all in all, Anthony, when you reviewed this report, is this a good report, yes or no, in your eyes? I don't think it's good or bad. I would say it was soft. John acknowledged that it was a soft quarter.
Okay.
I mean, they missed on pretty much every estimate metric that there was across the board. I mean, there was signs of growth year over year on all of the metrics that matter: revenue, gross profit, net income, free cash flow from operations. So, I mean, it is a step forward year over year. Quarter over quarter, it was less than 1%. That it was less than 1% of negative growth. Quarter over quarter, I think it was 0.6 and 0.6% and 0.8%, respectively. I wouldn't say it was bad. I would just say it was soft. John acknowledged the drivers of that. It was softening retail sales and decline in transaction volume in Illinois, Maryland, as well as what was the other markets?
Increased competition, though.
Illinois, Maryland, and New Jersey. Increased competition in proximity to their retail locations, as well as a decline in transaction volume. Mild decline in transaction volume. Yeah, but I mean, they're still doing on a per dispensary basis. I think they're the leader actually in revenue on a per dispensary basis in the industry. And I mean, like I said, we saw year over year growth. Ohio's coming online here shortly. They're still expecting, I think, $40 million in free cash flow from operations in 2024. And Q3, Q4 are going to be building blocks on top of this.
Yeah, be interesting to see about some of the more latest earnings from other companies. But as more and more companies scale back with the amount of states that they're operating in, they're obviously getting better in the states that they are going to focus on, which, like I said, is increased competition. But getting back to the net loss, have you heard anything? Have you learned anything based on the feedback as to like where the net loss really came from? Like, is this a one-time thing?
No, it wasn't. The one-time thing was the employee tax credit that was utilized to basically nullify the loss on a year-over-year basis for 2023, which was a one-time employee tax credit. As far as the justification of the loss on the financial metrics this quarter, there wasn't a lot of color around that.
Okay. Well, we've reached out to John Hartman. We're trying to set up a date and time to interview him on the base of the latest earnings, but lots of interviews this week. And John hopefully is part of that schedule, but we will lock down a day and time for them. Just haven't confirmed it yet. So be patient with us as we try to find out and learn more information. But Ohio, as you said, set to go live tomorrow morning. That'll be key for this company, is they're going to be a key player within that market. So we could see some growth. We should see some growth for the overall company over the next year or so, with a state like adult use going live. But big day tomorrow for the state of Ohio, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they've got locations in the top 3 most populous cities in the state of Ohio. And I mean, one of the really positive things from this quarter is their EBITDA was all being derived from Illinois in quarters past. And I mean, that's starting to broaden out to where their other markets are starting to become profitable. So like I said, I mean, I see this as a not good or bad. It was soft. You got to call it like it is. But this is a building block, and I expect Q3 and Q4 to be stronger in terms of revenue, profitability, and growth.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's now move into our second topic here on Into the Wire on a Monday afternoon. It involves Washington. And before we get into it, let's welcome in our good friend, MSOS Monday. Dan Ahrens joins us. Good to see you. How are you? Happy Monday.
It's not a very happy Monday, but I'll be here anyway. It's ugly out there, but good to talk to you guys. Good to talk to you guys.
You as well. Big day tomorrow in Ohio. We'll get into that. But just, before we get into that, let's shift now to Washington and news that broke over the weekend from Tom and the crew over at Marijuana Moment, involving Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who drafted and submitted a letter to the DEA and Attorney General Merrick Garland, encouraging them to reschedule cannabis. Notable names that were also on the signed document were Senators Cory Booker from New Jersey and Ron Wyden from Oregon. I'll start with you, Dan. I don't really know how to take this, because I really don't know what side of the fence these guys are on. But
nobody does.
What was your reaction when you heard this? And is this just another latest move by some of these politicians to put their name attached to something to make themselves look good?
Well, I think you might have answered your own question.
Yeah.
When I saw the news, I said, oh, okay, that's nice, and moved on. So I really don't think it's, I could write a letter saying I recommend it too. This guy's been a gaslighter for the last 3 or 4 years, but you know what? It doesn't hurt. So the more the merrier. Thanks for putting it out there, guys. I don't really think you are trying probably just to attach yourselves and ride the coattails of what's already happening after lying to us for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But hey, we can't complain. Thanks for getting on the bandwagon, guys. It's not much more than that.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Anthony, what was your reaction? I'm sure you probably just dismissed this quite quickly, but yeah, we were in Washington. We had out of all the senators and congressmen that we walked by, probably 95% of them gave us the chance, the time of day, just to basically talk, have a little bit of a conversation. Cory Booker was not one of them. And I find it hilarious in some ways and comical as to how he's putting his name behind this, knowing what he's done, to Dan's point. But your reaction?
Yeah, so I mean, they're opportunists. Obviously, I'm not going to bat an eye at them writing this letter to potentially try to move the DEA to expedite the final ruling. Any noise is good noise as it relates to that. I mean, the most frustrating thing was, and this is a direct quote, that rescheduling, Chuck was referring to rescheduling.
Yeah.
It will also bolster cannabis-related businesses, many of which are owned by people criminalized for marijuana offenses, opening them up to critical investment opportunities. Schedule 3 does not do anything regarding that. Nothing. You know what it does? Safe and hope that he won't pass and he won't bring to a vote. So I don't know what he's talking about, but Schedule 3 will not create critical investment opportunity within the cannabis space. If you're going to play mental gymnastics and you somehow want to come up to the assumption that the MSOs having more free cash flow and relinquishing 280E somehow allows them to deploy more capital into fledgling cannabis businesses, sure. I can guarantee you Chuck isn't thinking that deep into the equation, but I mean, what he's saying is just completely false. Schedule 3 doesn't do any of that, literally. but his amendments that he stonewalls and that he refuses to actually move forward would do everything that he's saying.
One thing I've noticed, there's a lot of people with an audience, especially on Twitter, are spreading a lot of BS towards this space right now. Ken Griffin, hedge fund manager as well. Who's the person that you made a comment on our Twitter account earlier today, Anthony? What was her name? Was
that's a woman named Martha Bueno. She's a Delta 8 peddling hemp business. She's also a real estate agent. She's got a bunch of other businesses apparently. She's got a fake Twitter audience. I mean, she's got 60,000 followers on there. Her engagement is like nothing pretty much. And she created some long-winded thread about Amendment 3. And one of her claims in there were basically that it was going to indemnify any of the MSOs that are operating in the state. As far as harming patients goes, there'll be no recourse. They're going to start spraying pesticides. It was like an argument that they used for the vaccine that scared people. It's like she kind of just made an inference there and kind of tried to use the same point of correlation. It fell completely flat and it was a complete lie. Like she's just making shit up. She's literally just making shit up to suit her agenda. She's a lunatic as far as I'm concerned with what she puts on Twitter. Ken Griffin's another story. So, I mean, he donated.
I love Brady Cobb's tweet this weekend. That was great. Calling him out.
I mean, it is what it is. Ken stated a bunch of Sam talking points.
Yes.
That we all have data that backs up to the contrary of everything that he stated. He came from a state that has adult use cannabis in Illinois, where Citadel used to be headquartered before they came down to Florida post-pandemic. Ken's doing nothing but making political contributions, and this is a favor to Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party of Florida. This suits his agenda. Ken's a massive, massive supporter of the Republican Party. This is him doing them a favor. This is not him not wanting cannabis in the state of Florida. They were like, look, we need you to do this. We'll probably give you X, Y, and Z down the road. Horse traded some things, and Ken had a piece put in the Herald to where he's donating $12 million against Amendment 3. That's probably what it is at face value.
Very little thought put into it. Favor to a political friend, not a whole hell of a lot more. Shouldn't be too much into it.
I'd love to hear some of our Florida audience that watches this live streaming, and maybe some feedback even from you, Anthony, too. Like, yes on 3 and what Kim's doing. Like, are you hearing and seeing a lot of it around Florida right now? Has there been conversation? You see it online with what's going on so far?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff on Twitter. I'm not going to any grassroots events or really seeing it mobilized in person. I mean, I talk to everybody that I know usually about it. I went down to the Keys on Friday. I was wearing a Yes on 3 shirt that I was wearing on the show. And then when I got there, most of the people that I was with that weekend were like, so what's that? And I was like, oh, it's adult use cannabis in Florida. They had no idea. Not a lot of people have any idea that are outside our bubble, unfortunately. Well, let me rephrase that. A lot of people have an idea of what's going on. And I mean, Amendment 3 is doing a lot as far as outreach goes. Am I seeing it on a first-person basis, or am I seeing examples of it on a first-person basis? No, but I'm a very small sample size.
Yeah. Interesting to see. Well, before we get into the next topic, Dan, it's just like, let's face it, the macro level right now, the Dow is just getting beat up brutally. 2.9 trillion lost on the stock market on Friday. So you, being a person that manages money, like, how are you navigating through this right now?
I've always said a lot of things about diversify your investments, people, and don't have all your money in risk stuff. In my personal investments, I've lost my tail on semiconductors and that whole space recently. But hey, I want to double back real quick to Chucky Schumer and all that. I'm going to stick to my story that Schedule 3 is moving along, and only after that gets done and actually codified and rules come out, then it's going to be easier for bills to move through Congress.
Yeah, I agree.
it will be less politicized and less game playing and easier for some stuff to roll through. Nothing's going to happen till that. But I'm going to stick to that when you hear Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker and them playing games.
Listen, we waited a long time. 4 weeks. 4 weeks doesn't really matter all that much. But last week when we had Boris on, he's like, if this is going to happen, rescheduling, they want to keep it as close as possible leading up to the actual election. And he's thinking speculate around beginning of October. There has been some feedback the way this has progressed over the last couple of days, especially with the Trump administration starting to include some verbiage on their platform as well. Based on what we learned 7 days ago to where we are now, like, do you think this happens sooner potentially? Like, yes, of course you're going to say, yeah, it could, but do you think you'd be surprised if it's before October?
Nothing's going to surprise me as we go through these next few months towards November. But yeah, trying to predict anything, put timing on it, God, who the hell knows? And you really shouldn't listen to anybody. But if there's anything positive, this has been completely insane, and Kamala's getting a big bump right now, but that's going to fade away, and Trump's going to come out with some other messaging. He's taking a little bit of a back seat to all the rah with Kamala, and there's going to be some crazy stuff happen in the next month or two. I do know that there are people in the Trump team's ear. I don't think cannabis is a big issue there.
Yeah.
But I know there's people putting messaging in their ears, and they might need to come out in favor of states' rights and say a couple little things to combat Kamala. So, it's, I said before, and it's not a secret. Like Walden Angelos, and the documentary that he's came out with, and so on. There's a lot of Republicans in that documentary, and I know that team is in touch with the right people on the Trump team, for what that's worth.
Kyle Kazan was saying that to us on Friday, right, Anthony?
Yeah.
He was hoping to speak to the Trump administration.
I know someone, it's an executive in the space, firsthand, talking to that camp. Not going to say who it is, but we all know someone that is, and it's someone that we would want doing that. By the way, Green Thumb reported.
And knocked it out of the park as you'd expect.
Second quarter revenue of $280 million, 11% year-over-year increase, $200 million in cash on the balance sheet at the quarter's end. Second quarter GAAP net income of $21 million or 9 cents per share. Adjusted EBITDA of $94 million or 34% of revenue. And they repurchased 1.65 million shares of stock for a total of $20 million in hard dollars within their buyback program.
Hey, to add a couple for you, Anthony,
very strong order from Ben.
Comparative numbers: gross profit 150 versus estimate of 144, and you just said the adjusted the EBITDA 94 million. The estimate was 84 million.
So he smashed. They crushed it.
They did.
Crushed it.
Got it.
But everything else happening in the world right now is macro, and no one gives a shit. So we are in a strange situation right now, and that's something else I wanted to mention when you said what the Dow's done and so on, Shad. This is all macro. It came out of unemployment numbers. It came out of an index that no one ever talks about, the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing. That came out on Thursday, and it's something no one's talked about in the last 3 or 4 years, but it can pretend a future slowdown. So, and of course, all that bleeds over into Asia and the carry trade and everything else. So we are where we are, but it has nothing to do with Wednesday. AMD came out with great earnings. I don't have any reason to believe that NVIDIA is not going to come out with great earnings. We just have to wait till the end of the month for that.
Well, the S&P is still up 10% year to date this year. I mean, with everything that just happened over the last 4 trading sessions, the S&P is still up.
Well, we had Dan from Chart Guys. Dan from the Chart Guys joined us on Friday, and he said, based on a lot of this news, the cannabis space as a whole has actually held up rather well since this. I don't want to say incredible, but it's done. But last week you outlined to me, Anthony, Jim Cacioppo, that debt refinancing with Jushi, like there was as much as $9 million of his own money, and I found out this morning that founder Dennis Arsenal from Jushi as well, and added $7 million of his own money as well.
There's 16 million between the two of them, and then Jason Wild chipped in 77.5 million into the TerraSend financing, and that was announced Friday.
So what's that say? That's a vote of confidence, don't you guys think, for what they think could happen?
I've always been. Oh, I'm sorry, Anthony. I was just gonna say I've always been a fan of Jushi as a tier, 2. I mean, they're not in my top 3, 4, or 5 holdings. But no, because I talked to Jim and I talked to the team there, and I know that people had questions about their balance sheet and what they're doing.
Yeah,
I knew it was backstopped. I knew that Jim eats his own cooking, and they weren't going to go away.
Yeah,
and they have some big bets on some of the right states that we're still really waiting on, like Virginia and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Everybody's always known that Jason Wild puts his money where his mouth is, but Jushi was a little bit more behind the scenes, not as public with it. Sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
It's great. I mean, it's the equivalent of the CEOs and the top brass putting their money where their mouth is. I mean, and they're not small checks. It's not like, they're buying $150,000 of stock on the open market. Like you're talking $9 and $7 million checks. Those are big checks.
Big checks. Watch for Pennsylvania too, because if Governor Shapiro is selected as Kamala's running mate, you don't think so? No. Well,
it's probably going to be Walz out of Minnesota.
Well, time will tell. But finishing my thought, I thought if he was selected, does he want to pass adult use if they get behind that whole initiative prior to the election? Something to think about. But again, there's a lot of what ifs along that scenario. But I think the question, I didn't want to really ask specifically about Jushi, but that's a lot of money to basically front out of your own pocket. And I just think the overall confidence is starting to build more and more towards this space. But, again, we will see of rescheduling, but it is promising, and it does feel a little bit different this time with a lot of these names that are getting behind this document. And regardless of whether you like it or not, I think it's, just jumping on the bandwagon. At least there's a bandwagon right now to jump on, because we want to continue to build momentum. But let's now switch topic number 3 into the wire. And the biggest news this week is Ohio set to go live tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. This is by far the biggest announcement for the sector this week. Key markets across Ohio include Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo. Ben Kovler from GTI, he'll be on hand at one of the Rise locations in Ohio. That will actually be in Cleveland with the launch of adult use. Elsewhere, companies like Jushi in Cincinnati, Acreage in Columbus, the Cannabis Company Holdings in Dayton, all will be ready to go with what many are saying this market is very comparable to Illinois. So all in all, Anthony, this is a big day as we start to look at key growth states that are now officially live.
Yeah, I mean, I think John was saying today, they're expecting somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 times growth, going from John Hartman from Ascend on the earnings call. It's going to be the equivalent of Maryland. We're going to get what? We're going to get 2 months of numbers that actually flow into the Qs. For the next quarter when they report. We're going to be able to track those numbers. The only one that I think we'll be able to actually get a very good picture on is Verano, as they actually break out the numbers on the earnings reports. So we'll see the wholesale and retail numbers from a growth perspective on a quarter-over-quarter basis, so we can track what the med to adult use growth actually has been. But yeah, I mean, Ohio is going to be a big market. I mean, we've talked to a lot of people. General consensus is it might detract or siphon off a little bit of revenue from Michigan, which is a behemoth. I mean, I don't think anybody thought Michigan was going to track at like a $3 billion run rate, full adult use. So we'll see how the synergy, or not the synergies, how those two are going to act as far as relationships go. That being said, it's also been a very popular point that the pricing in Ohio is not going to be able to compete with Michigan for some time now. So those cross-border transactions that you're seeing, for the most part, will probably still persist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see Ohio impacting Michigan much because of what you said, Anthony, the pricing. Really? Well, yeah, Ohio's expensive. It's a premium market. But to piggyback on what Anthony said, the important thing about Ohio is, I'd compare it to Maryland a little bit in that it's a who's who of tier 1 MSOs. Yeah. It's a limited license state. It's MSO friendly in the way it's set up for the dispensary licenses. So it's super exciting. It's a major state, and it's certainly going to add to Q3.
I didn't realize this, but where does time go? It flies. But adult use went live December 2019 in Michigan, and their first month that they reported just over 6.9 million in revenue, and now they're averaging between 270 to 275 million a month. That's what I call growth. And if you want to have a good measuring stick as to how much this industry's advanced, that is a good indicator right there. But that's big, Ohio is border to Michigan. So, if they achieve those numbers, or even if it's less than that, it's just another big growth state, which is why we're really emphasizing on these specific companies. You get rescheduling, and that adds to the bottom line. You can understand why many people are very optimistic about the growth of these certain companies. But all eyes on Ohio tomorrow morning, that's for sure. Yeah. All right, let's now switch to the final announcement here this afternoon on Into the Wire. Want to bring up a new report by the HHS saying that federal laws prohibiting marijuana hinder our ability to fully understand the therapeutic potential of cannabis. Anthony, you want to maybe outline what's the latest here and outline some of the notable information that was included in this 15-page document?
Yeah, so I mean, this is essentially just another step forward for the HHS. This is about 6 months late. This was supposed to be delivered to lawmakers in January. They delivered it in June to lawmakers. It went public, and the full documents on Marijuana Moment site currently. The thing that I thought was, and it's all about research, as it relates to cannabis, opening up research, being able to actually access cannabis for research. And it's basically just outlining problems that have very easy fixes that we just haven't yet solved. For instance, research organizations are not allowed to legally purchase cannabis for research from state-regulated businesses because they're still legal on the federal level via Schedule 1. Wow. But what I thought was kind of confusing in here is they also were talking about the HALT Act as it relates to fentanyl. However, the HALT Act getting brought up again and getting momentum, that is to allow research into Schedule 1 substances. So I'm not sure why you would be addressing something like the HALT Act to increase research into Schedule 1 substances when the implications are you're going to reschedule cannabis here in the next couple of months. It's a little bit of mixed signals. However, psychedelics also get grouped into that as well. So there is some opacity to that being said.
Well, you can understand why this industry needs some clarity. It's so confusing with stuff that outlines.
There's no reason why, if an MSO has a GMP facility, why they shouldn't be able to contract with a research facility to do some sort of research on cannabis.
Yeah.
Like zero, except for the fact that we just have ass backwards laws.
Yeah. John Verville writes, Anthony looks like a true millennial with a touch of gray barely visible. There you go, my friend. Robert Griffiths, thank you, sir, for advertising the show to everyone. I appreciate your feedback. How's life in Brooklyn? Good to hear from you, my friend. Actually, before we finish up today, there was one more thing I think I wanted you to point out about the senators that got behind MDMA, because there's an official ruling that's going to be coming down from the FDA regarding MDMA in the next week or two. But what was the information you shared with me before we got going here today?
It was a coalition of congressional lawmakers expressing the urgency of the federal government as it looks to possibly authorize MDMA for PTSD, they're urging the government to authorize it for the treatment of PTSD.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, who knows what happens, but I won't be. I would be surprised if they do approve it, but what do I know? But at the same time, too, do they come back and basically ask for them to do more data? But in the event, let's say this does actually get approved, Dan, are you anticipating or thinking a lot of momentum could be built back into this industry, knowing how quiet it's been for quite some time?
We're talking about psychedelics.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
And our wonderful little fund, PSIL, your advertisement here, that is now under $1 a share. It's brutal. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a constant over the last 2 or 3 years. More headway, more acceptance. This letter that you guys just discussed. Yeah, I saw that earlier, and I think I liked it or retweeted it. I have no idea where that is going to be in approval, but I will take every additional straw that adds to the momentum of positive acceptance for all sorts of psychedelic treatments for traumatic brain injury, PTSD, depression, all sorts of things that our country is over prescribed prescription drugs for. So I don't know. It's one more step.
That's the you got to address. It's like, on paper, do you pass something, but what's the current landscape? And that's been some of the dialogue I've heard from some of the people within the industry. However, does that get a drug across the line? I don't know. Like, there were certain vaccines that were pretty much 12 yays and 11 no's as far as getting some of these vaccines approved back when COVID was at its height. But, could you say this is a pandemic as far as our mental health? I think that's an understatement. Clearly there is. And whether they actually move on something remains to be seen, but we'll find out either way within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think we're finding out that politicians are really good at writing letters. They're not necessarily good at actually driving action.
True.
Because we seem to be having a lot of letters pop up as it relates to drug policy, but we are not seeing a lot of action as it relates to drug policy. And it's the same contingent of politicians that keep writing these letters and keep driving the same message home without a lot of action.
Agreed.
Which brings us right back to Schedule 3. And I'm super glad it's being done by a different branch of the government than depending on our senators and representatives playing the games that they play.
But I think the key takeaway, as you said earlier, if we get rescheduling announced, do you think certain bills will actually be processed or could be passed? I don't want to say easier, but the interest level could be a lot more enticing in that situation compared to what we're sitting in right now. Correct?
I think it might be closer to a situation where Cory Booker and Schumer are saying, oh, look at us. We're finally getting some things done here and we're going to take credit for it. I think it will make those bills less controversial.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
I would be, Cory, if you want all the attention that you pass safe banking, go ahead. Just pass it. As Patriot Nation says, do your job, right?
Exactly.
All right, gents, listen, that wraps up. I know we got a busy schedule later this week. What do we got on deck this week, Anthony? Air Wellness to David Gobert. We're actually doing a pre-record. He's got a busy schedule with analysts, but we're recording with him early Wednesday afternoon. We're going to release that Thursday morning. Live stream, actually, this Thursday at 4 o'clock with Jim Cacioppo. That's beginning at 4. We're also going to be doing a pre-record interview with MaryMed CEO John Levine. That's going to be posted on Friday morning, and then a live stream on Friday. This will be a good one. Terracin with Jason Wild and Ziad Ghanem, along with Michael DiGiulio from Village Farms. So back to back. And then after that, we got to do a pre-record with David Klein from Canopy that we will launch next Monday. So other than that, we don't have much going on. Sounds like a busy week.
Solid week.
Guys.
And we have another person. How do I pronounce his last name? Jason Vidati, is it?
Vidati, yep. Ex-chairman of Harvest and currently with Story Cannabis.
Yeah, they reached out. And anyway, long story short, look forward to meeting him and getting to know more about his story and where we are today with the cannabis space, but that'll be launched this week too. Keep you posted on some of the other interviews with Kim Rivers and Charlie Backdill. But in the meantime, make sure to click, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on that bell for all notifications. And make sure to like this video and share it with your network and subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Dan, Anthony, appreciate your time. We'll see you. Anthony, I'll see you back here on Wednesday.
Yep. See everybody Wednesday.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching our latest